Is Bill Burton here? Get Off Burton Partners was our next friend to say thank you to. We'll get him this thank you. Andy Parisi, who probably flew, and right above Robert, my brother, who's moving away so he doesn't get the spotlight, is our grandfather Mansour's shirt manufacturing certificate. But the history of the company moves all the way around the timeline, all the way to Farah today. The mannequin and products behind Andy are what Harry Ellis is marketing in the United Kingdom. Farah's been in business for 90 years continuously, and they're actually relaunching the Farah brand in the U.S. So it's a pretty exciting night. So enjoy the exhibit. We're going to play the film for you. This is a film that will be running for school kids, and this exhibit will be up for a year. And we hope you enjoy it. Joe, you can get your Kleenex out. Where are you?
Right here.
Joe Gomez, you gotta get your Kleenex.
I can see from the hood.
lot of people in El Paso about the history that many of you created. There are two of the donors who came in just a little late. They gave Bill Conroy his gift. Bill, you want to raise your hand?
You don't want to walk around the...
Let's go downstairs.
Isn't there more?
Yeah, let's go downstairs. That's what he said.
Queremos avisarles que si están interesados en contar su historia acerca del trabajo que hicieron en Farah, por favor firmen. Estamos estudiantes en línea tomando sus datos. La mesa se encuentra al fondo de la esquina o vamos a pasar con nuestras hojas de información. Si buscan a alguien, por favor.
Go ahead, sir.
Good evening. Buenas tardes. Good evening, everyone. Bienvenidos. We'd like to start the program.
Hi there.
Hey,
How are you?
How are you doing, Alan? How's your dad?
Everyone would like to take a seat, take their drinks. We'd like to go ahead and introduce the dignitaries here this evening. I don't know.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Well, we're still here.
Alright, Joe's getting everyone. Come on, Joe. Get everyone down there. Let's have everyone's attention. We'd like to get the program going. Would everyone like to take a seat, please?
Getting our giants. You know, it's something that's very, very important for us to know our history and to know where we came from. And when I spoke to Mr. Farah on Tuesday, and I mentioned to him that when I was in high school, I worked at Farah during the summer months. They had a great program. They hired high school students, and it seemed like, you know, going back to high school because everyone that I knew was actually working there. And I worked at the Paisano plant for the summer. And I was telling about the story about when I was there and what I observed. And what I observed, and I was telling my staff right now, was that everybody seemed to be very happy there. It was a happy place. And I remember every morning going in there, and of course at that time we were record players, and the mañanitas would play every single morning. And I didn't know what it was about, and I was like, why do you play that song every day? And they told me it's to honor everyone that has a birthday on that day, because there were so many people that everyone had a birthday, every day of the year. And so to all of you, any of you that are here, that is your birthday, well, happy birthday to you. You know, the Farah Company is someone. It made a difference in many people's lives, and it certainly made a difference in my life. And it was a job that, I saw all of you there. I saw that you worked, so diligently. But it was something that I would tell my mom in the afternoon, Mom, they do the same thing every day, and she'd say, well, if you want to get ahead in life, you have to go to school. And so I would say, well, yes, I want to go to school because I think it's important. But also because, when I would sew, they would have me sewing there was a little stitch on the bottom of the zipper. And, in the afternoon, they would bring back everything that I had done wrong. And I would say, how does anybody know that it's wrong? I couldn't see the wrongness in it. But I said, no, I don't want to do this. So as a result of that experience, and I worked there for 2 summers. And thank God to the Farah family, because that gave me the opportunity to buy clothes for the rest of the year and maybe even go to some of the high school games. But it also showed me that, there was a lot of good in people. And it was a place where everyone was so happy, and you waited for the break so you could go and eat everything you wanted. And you had a cafeteria, and it was just like being in high school, actually. And so to me, it was a very unique experience, and I personally want to thank the Farah family for allowing me and for hiring me to work there and believing that I could do a good job, just as all of you did in that day. I am now a city representative for District 3, which is the central of El Paso. One of the things that I've told my staff is that God does hear your prayers.
Ken Farah, Robert Farah, Helene Zweifel, Joe Shamali Jr., and Victor Shamali. And I also have to thank the museum staff who put in extra hours, extra effort, really made this event pay off. And some folks from the staff that need really special recognition include the curator, Barbara Angus, Jim Murphy, and Gabriel Ogeen, who made sure that the whole thing ran smoothly. So thank them with a round of applause, please. And finally, I'd like to thank the city itself, thank our wonderful mayor, our city council, our city manager, because it's with their commitment to an institution like this that we're able to do these types of programming on a regular basis. And lastly, I'm going to turn this over to Dr. Julia Bussiger, who you probably haven't met. She's our wonderful director here at the History Museum, and she's going to talk a little bit about Awakening Our Giants.
Coming across the street and out in front of the building.
Dirás que no me quisiste, pero vas a estar muy triste y así te vas a quedar. Con el dinero y sin dinero, yo hago siempre lo que quiero. Y mi palabra es la ley. No tengo trono ni reina, ni nadie quien me comprenda, pero sigo siendo el rey. Una piedra.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. I'm Michael Topp. I'm an Associate Dean in the College of Liberal Arts at UTEP, and I too want to welcome you and thank you very much for coming. This is the first of what will be a series of panels on Farah Manufacturing Company. It started as 4 panels. It's up to 6 now, such as Jim Farah's enthusiasm. I actually have to watch this like most people watch the stock market, although I like the stock market, the number of panels just keeps going up. This panel is going to focus on what made Farah successful. The ensuing ones will focus on a number of different issues concerning Farah Manufacturing. There'll be one on Farah's role in the history of the garment industry, another on Farah and the diverse populations that were touched by the Farah Manufacturing Company, another one on Farah Manufacturing and family business history, and another one on the Farah strike and boycott and labor relations. And then finally, we're not sure what the timing is going to be for that one. There'll be one on Farah and Latino entrepreneurship. We're looking to run these through the fall of 2010. The dates are still somewhat tentative. We've applied for a grant from Humanities Texas to fund these panels. The committee met yesterday. The full board meets next week. We have our fingers crossed, but we're going to do the panels regardless. It's just we'll have better food if we get them. So my hope is, I was at the event last night. I'm assuming all of you were as well. It was just a wonderful celebration. And my hope is that this panel and the ensuing panels will continue that celebration and also examine Farah Manufacturing critically. Not critically in the sense of baseless criticism, but in terms of looking at what the impact of this giant of a company was on the industry of which it was a part, the community to which it contributed so much, the myriad population.
Themselves much better than I do to actually introduce themselves, and I'll just name them and say what they did and who they were for Farah Manufacturing. And then they'll tell you just briefly, maybe a minute each, what exactly who and what they are, and then we'll get into the whole program. So we're going to start, of course, with Joe Shamali Jr., former Senior Vice President of Operations. Joe, would you like to just say a couple words about yourself?
About myself?
Yes. Just give us a brief CV bio of who and what you are.
Well, I was raised in Marfa, Texas. I happened to come here one weekend, and I always called up my Uncle Joe Farah and asked him how he was. And he told me that Willie wanted to talk to me, that they were getting ready to expand. And so I talked to Willie and made an appointment for that Saturday, and I came to El Paso and talked to him. When I got back to Marfa, I had another job going, and they wanted to send me to Houston and on to Matamoros, Mexico. At that time, it was for being a cotton buyer. And so I think I made the right decision. I took the Farah job. That's how it started.
And I'm sure that we will never regret that moment and that decision. Thank you, Joe. Our next panelist is, of course, Ken Farah, son of Willie and Betty Farah, and Ken was the former assistant treasurer of Farah Manufacturing.
I don't have anything more to say. Carmen just told you everything you need to know.
I don't think so. You're a wonderful person.
Well, I started pushing a broom when, I don't know, I was 14 or 15 years old, and would probably have a fight 2 or 3 times a week with Willie. Everybody in the room knows that. So I don't know what else to tell you. You really have covered it.
Well, that's wonderful. I know you've got a lot more to say, so we'll get on to that in a few moments. And our next panelist, thank you. Our next panelist is Bill Conroy, former Executive Vice President and President of Farah Manufacturing.
Well, I started to work at Farah as an accountant, and as the company grew, I got to do all sorts of interesting things. I like to work. I'm still working. And my wife says, well, if you like to work, Farah is the place for you. That was great.
And that's what keeps you so young. Of course, Jim Farah, eldest son of Willie and Betty, and Jim was president of Farah Manufacturing. Jim?
Well, it reminds me that Kenneth didn't have to go to work until he was 14. I don't remember how old Robert or Helene were, but I was 9. But I think the oldest does have to go through more, I guess.
But we're still waiting for you to start.
Hi, Mike.
I started at Farah when I was 6.
Beatrice?
Hi, my name is Beatriz Barrere and I work at Periolis International. I'm the marketing coordinator for Farah. And we're bringing Farah back to America. So.
And you know, Mike just skipped over himself, but you know, Mike was the former Savannah Farah USA president. So Mike, you know, we have to give you the accolades that you deserve.
I started my retail career as a buyer at Diamonds in Phoenix, and I was buying junior sportswear. I wasn't in the men's area. I was in the men's area when I was in the stores. And my office at Diamonds was right on the corner of where the divisional merchandise manager was of men's. So all these guys from these men's companies would come by my office and go into the gentleman's name was Howard Rubenstein, and he was a screamer. You would walk in his office, he'd shut the door and scream at people for 45 minutes. So, and of course that's where my office was, so all I heard all day was screaming. So the Farah guys would come in, the Farah guys or the Hager guys or the Levi guys would come in. For 45 minutes, they would be screamed at by Mr. Rubenstein, and after they're coming out, I would be giggling, because everybody just got screamed at. So they stopped by my office one day and said, what are you laughing at? You know, I could sit in there and get screamed at as well as you guys could. And they said, well, if you think this is so easy, why don't you try it? So that was it. So I joined the company in 1979. Was not 6. I was not 6. In 1979.
What were you, 4?
Right. Went to Los Angeles to start my Farah career there, and of course asked the company for a sheet of the sales in Los Angeles, and it was blank, because there were no sales in Los Angeles. So went there and sold a few pants, and came back to El Paso in 1989, and was here for about 12 or 13 years, which were incredibly great years.
Thank you, Mike. There's one more special person I want to introduce you to, and that's Bob Nachman, Dean of the College of Business at the University of Texas in El Paso. Thank you so much for being here, Bob. We really appreciate it. You know, family business is of course very dear and close to my heart. I was the youngest daughter who took over our family business, which was hotels, and I started at the age of 5. I used to hand out the keys to all our hotel guests, and I used to stand on a little box, and it was my biggest joy was if there were those little pigeonholes, if there were some letters, and I could give them the key and the letters and the notes. So I know what it is, and I know what great pride came sweeping that room, and you, Jimmy, being there from the age of 9. Family business is the backbone of our society here in the United States. 92%, between 87 and 92% of all the businesses in the United States are family owned or family controlled, be they public or private. So it's very special to recognize what a family business Farah Manufacturing was, and we're going to get into what Farah meant to each panelist. And when did you first hear of Farah, and why are you here? And each person is going to speak and answer that question. So, Joe, we will start with you. What did Farah mean to you?
It meant like a hell of a good job. And I enjoyed working there very much. It was a real challenge. And then the Farah Company and the way they treated employees. And it was just a very enjoyable career.
And when did you join the company, Joe?
1950.
1950. And you stayed with it for how many years?
26 years.
Good grief. And why are you here today?
Because Jimmy Farah told me to come.
I knew I'd get blamed.
So cute. Thank you. Ken, what did Farah mean to
Well,
you?
when did I first hear about it? Let's see.
Thank you, Mike. You know, Mike brought up something, and I just wanted to tell you that, you know, every family that I've worked with throughout the world has got a culture, and it doesn't mean that here in El Paso or in Michigan that it's any different. Each company has a culture. And I think it was you, Mike, and Ken, who said there was a lot of shouting going on in the Farah manufacturing. But it's a cultural thing. I'm Italian. I come from an Italian family. My father used to do a lot of shouting. But you've got to, when you're working with a family business, in order to understand a family business, it's like a symphony. You've got to pick up the tune before you can hum along. And so with the Farah company, there might have been a lot of shouting, but they are an ethnic family. I worked in Beirut. I worked at the university, the American University of Beirut. And the people are very excitable, and they like the Italians. There's not much difference. It must be the Mediterranean blood, you know. But in order to understand Farah and Farah manufacturing and everything that was going on there, you have to understand that this is an ethnic culture, and what they were doing was just a normal day in their lives. Beatrice, tell us a little bit about when you first... Oh, what? That is wonderful. Wonderful news. Thank you, Beatrice. Now, anybody can take this. We don't have to go in line, but let's talk about the early product line and how it evolved and how the jean make was extended to make casual pants. Who would like to go first?
You do that. Oh, I wasn't there.
Bill was there. Bill? Joe? Come on, Joe. Tell us about it.
Well, I think what it involved was when we were making the jeans, we used to make mainly for Montgomery Ward, Sears, and Pennies. And of course, it's like a lot of manufacturing companies. You all start out with CMT cut, making trim, but all you're doing is making the pants and taking a little profit, but you're not establishing your name. So I think at that point, that's when Willie and Jimmy decided that we better start establishing the name. So we did a little less of the jeans and doing the cut, make it trim contracts, and go into, that's when we started the slacks. And we had slacks started, and it gradually grew, and using the Farah name. And that's what established the Farah name. And of course, the product.
How many employees did you have at that time when you were doing the CMT and then moved on?
Well, when I started with Farah, it was 300 employees. Probably by the time we moved into the 3rd Street plant, 1953, we probably were getting up there to 600 and over on the employees. I can't remember.
Does anyone remember towards the end, what was the biggest number of employees you had?
Biggest number?
Mm-hmm.
Total? Well, we had to hit close between 9,000 and 10,000.
9,000 and 10,000 employees. That is incredible. Can you imagine how many families that affected? And that is the whole thing. You become responsible not only for your family and their well-being, but the families of those that work with you, your employees. So, wow, 9,000 to 10,000. Jimmy?
On the product line is one of my favorite subjects because it's part of the reason the company, I think, was so successful. Starting out, the make and the fit of boys' jeans was very different than men's work pants or dress pants. At that point, there weren't any casual pants. You wore a suit to work, or you wore work clothes, work wear for the factory. And I don't know whether it was intentional or accidental, but the make on the casual pants was a jean make. And if your point of view was from the clothing side of the business, then the make was inexpensive looking, but the fit and the make made them very comfortable. Flattery is a funny word to use, but not baggy. And I think it's one of the most critical reasons the company grew so well, because everybody else was either coming from a work pant mentality or a dress pant mentality. And Farah pioneered casual clothing. I loved it when I read the Perry Ellis tagline, Farah, the original casual company, because in 1950, 55, 56, there wasn't a branded casual menswear line, except Farah. There were Levi's, but that wasn't considered casual, that was a jean. So I'm answering your first question.
Yes, no, absolutely. Does anybody else from the panel want to add anything to that?
I think one of the significant things about the slacks is that if you take the whole components of the product, the Farah put more into the fabric itself. It was better fabric, it was more durable. We offered more colors, we offered more variety in the whole product line. And as Jim said, the fit, I think throughout the whole Farah history, fit was a very important factor in the, how well it was accepted or sought after by the customer.
So let's talk about the exclusive fabric development. When did it actually start, the ramble cord and ramble top? And how central was the strategy to Farah's competitiveness?
I can't answer that.
Well, I can't say that I was involved in fabric development. That was really all the way. But he did perceive that there, was not so much. I think we created a need really for fabrics that looked different. They felt different. You had different weights of fabric. Even today, I don't see that in the stores. I see all the Dockers and all that stuff is pretty much the same weight. But we had lightweight, for hot weather, warm climates. We had heavier ones for that market. But there was a lot of fabrics that had a surface interest to them. That's the ramble top and ramble cord, and so it created a whole. You weren't filling a need, but you were creating a market with that.
I think, though, that the concept of proprietary development, I remember in the late 50s, and I was pretty young then.
It was about the only jean on the market at that time that the patch would come off. Would not come off. And that was the way we did it, and the machine that Willie made to put the patch on the pant. But as far as out in the retail market, I don't think there was not another jean with that patch that they didn't have trouble with the patches coming off. Ours never did. We just a top quality product.
And this was in the 50s, you say?
Yeah.
That is huge. I mean, that is so innovative. And to have created something like that. Nowadays when I work with businesses, we have a whole R&D department and this development, and we're creating all these innovative ideas. And here we've got someone in the 50s who just, didn't have in those days R&D departments and came up with something like this.
Well, later on, we had a very big R&D department. We had plenty. We worked on machines and the different things that Willie wanted done to a machine. For example, we had a puller on some machines. There wasn't a single machine in the market that had a puller on it. And people were just trying to see how we did that or what we did to it.
Did you have engineers working with you?
We had a whole R&D development department.
Phenomenal.
Some of them are in the room.
Way ahead of your time.
Joe,
Way
explain
ahead.
the puller a little bit more clearly for
The
the
puller
audience.
was a machine that is a feet off the arm, is where you do the inseam. And as the cloth goes through, that was one of the toughest operations in making the jean. And that puller would be on the end here, the needle would be here, and that puller would help and and then help bring the fabric through and bring it back smooth where you don't have all that wrinkling and everything, and gaps and everything. And that is one thing. And the thing about that thing there is, one time at 3rd Street, we had one of the guys come out of here, Montgomery Ward or Sears, and he brought a guy with him. And he was supposed to be on that, with that company to check the quality and stuff. And it ended up, and I think that was the start of when we stopped making it. Willie found out later the guy he brought in was really an engineer. And they wanted to get a look at that puller to see what we had. And when Willie found that out, I think that was the start of not making any more jeans.
There was a little yelling that
Just the culture, Ken, just the culture. But that is phenomenal, because nowadays what we do, we're great proponents of when we're working with businesses and the R&D department, employees are actually required to take 20% of their time to think up innovative ideas for the company. And they are paid to take off that time and to come up with ideas. And some of them feel, well, this is so stupid, you know, I'm not creative. And yet some people come up just to tell you how creative people can be.
Willie never would all the innovations and all the inventions he did on the machine. He never would patent it. His explanation was it's just a license to steal. He never would patent it.
Is that right? Interesting. Let's talk about sales and marketing policies, which were key to the brand's success.
Well, you know, I'd like to take part of that one.
I might add something to that. I think that over the earlier years, there was a transition. Well, there was an earlier time when stores bought, you know, twice a year, maybe 3 times a year. And there was a transition, and I think Farah was a large part of that, where we became a year-round resource. You know, stores could stock what they needed and reorder. So it was a big help to the stores as well as to Farah, and that year-round resource thing.
Thank you. Who would like to talk about the retail distribution policies and suggested retail pricing? How did you derive those? These are we've done it in 4 phases, and at the end of this phase, it was Jimmy Farah's death and how the company changed as a result. This is Willie's brother. Jimmy's death and how the company, did the company change and how did it change as a result of his death?
Can I tell you a little story first?
Absolutely, we're here to hear the stories. That's what makes it so real.
You know, there was talk about, you know, the transition from cut, make, and trim to...
I think he just about covered it there. The thing about it, I think the easiest way that I'd explain it was that when Jimmy was there, and Willie says we need 3 more factories, Jimmy would say we can only afford 1, and that's why that balance was so good. That's just my opinion.
And you know, it's a wonderful thing when you have that, when you have someone who can balance someone else. I'm working at the moment with a very large company in San Diego, and the one brother is very progressive and very innovative, as Willie was, and the other one is more like checks and balances and wants to know, can we afford to do this, can we afford to do that? So it must have been a big loss to the Farah manufacturing company when Jimmy died to have lost that balance. Was there any way that became rectified? Did you bring someone else in? Was a COO brought in? How did you balance it off? Bill. Okay, Bill.
There's only one person up here can answer that.
Well, I don't know that you can say that we did, because we did move into a far more ambitious mode of operation. We did. But there were other voices know, you had a board of directors, you had the other officers of the company that, you know, had their own views of the thing. Obviously, Willie, you know, dominated those decisions, but there was the input, you know, from other people. So,
Did Willie listen?
pardon?
Did Willie listen to the input from the other people? Was he receptive?
Well, I can't say he didn't listen, but he pretty much knew his own role. Can I make a comment? And I have to say that the guy was smart. He really was.
I was thinking this week about the differences that I remember because I was very young when my uncle passed away. But
I'll tell you, Willie's mom, though, you know, she was in the factory there when I started with him. I'll tell you what, a lot of the top quality and everything come out of that fair. That's where it started. Mrs. Farah, I'll tell you, that garment was so dry while she was there on that floor. She was there with us when I started, the first year I started. She sure started them on the right quality and how to sew it out. I'll guarantee that.
You know, I'm going to throw a challenge out to you, Bob. At UTEP, you should get maybe some of the graduate students, the MBA students, who can actually write up a case history, like a Harvard case history, on the Farah family, because you've got so many dynamics, and you've got organizational behavior here, you've got the dynamic, the gender dynamics. It would be a phenomenal case to actually write up. So Mike and Bob, I challenge you to do that.
Well, thank you.
And you can't say Jimmy asked you to.
Thank you. I didn't ask you to do that.
Oh, you did? Well, I'd be happy, you know, to work with you on it, and, you know.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, absolutely, Bob.
For those of us who are not familiar with the complete history, when was Farah incorporated? Who incorporated it? And what was the initial structure of offices?
In 1920, Mansour Farah, our grandfather, started the business in El Paso. There were no officers. He was the president, the owner, and that was that. Because Joe and Bill started in the 50s, the organizational structure probably started then. But the simple way the business worked is that Mansour did everything. I think he had some of his brother's children in the business in the very early years too. Joe's cousins, would be my distant cousins. When my uncle Jimmy graduated from high school, he worked in the business. He had the role that Bill had. He was the business manager to his father, and then when his father died, he took over the business management part because our father was grown enough at that point. Our grandmother went to work in the business, but I don't think a formal officer structure happened until later in the 50s.
in 1946, more or less, an attorney here in town named Bates Bill incorporated the company and got stock for the work because they couldn't pay him.
Which was with a lot of money later.
Which became worth quite a lot of money.
The
company went public. It was incorporated in, I want to say 46, might have been 45, 47. And then went public in 67.
And was Jimmy the president at that point in the corporation?
Yeah. Yes.
And the brothers had understanding. They really did. Willie did respect the fact that his older brother made the final decisions. And I think if there's ever a dispute about that, maybe Hannah had some role in that, but I don't know. It was really an understanding that worked between the two of them.
Jimmy's never had that problem with me.
He's in charge.
The question you asked, was Jimmy alive when it went public? Did you ask
When it
that?
went public.
No, I was just trying to get a sense of the origin of the firm and the movement to Jimmy Moore as to the structure and relationship at that point. So the firm had been launched before both Jimmy and Willie were involved.
Right.
I think I heard you say at the point of incorporation is when that leadership structure of Jimmy Moore was.
Our grandfather passed away in the 30s.
And Jimmy took over then. Jimmy was in charge from the 30s until he died in 1964.
there's one part of the story of a couple stories around my uncle's death that I think is interesting. I don't know whether Bill or Joe were involved heavily in this, but there were times when Willie and Jimmy would argue so much that the emotions were terrible, which is part of the ethnicity thing that you were talking about. And I remember one time when I think our dad came home after work and was crying.
If that had ever gone through, I'd have been very much surprised. Yeah. No way.
Okay, so moving along, let's discuss the international expansion. We're now in the early 70s, and the international expansion over time, saving the brand. Any of the panelists? Bill?
Thank you for offering to do this. You had probably more longevity, continuity with the overseas expansion than anybody. I mean, all I remember is I got a trip out of it as a kid. I got to do some research. I love that.
Well, you went to Japan one time, I remember that.
But I really didn't. I don't really think I had much to do with it.
Well, we all, we felt like there was a, opportunity to, use our abilities overseas. The guy that really started it was John Holmes. And he had a fairly long career, I think, with DuPont, the chemical side of the thing. He also had worked for Levi in their international division for some time. And so he, actually, I think he had kind of
The settlement.
I tell you what happened inside of the boycott. Well, what happened? Really, I think the biggest thing was when the church started and got into it.
And why did the church do that, Joe?
Well, I don't know. Somebody went up to Bishop Metzger and they talked to him about that and how bad conditions were in all the fair plants and everything, which was all just the lies as part of the union talk. And why they got into it, I don't know. And there was an article in the paper just before Bishop Metzger passed on, and in that article, and they had talked to him, and it just sounded like he regretted doing it. And I wish I'd have saved that article, because that's the way it ended up. And we went up there to talk to him. I think Bill went with Willie. And I had made and I had talked to Bishop Metzger, because I think over half of the directors, officers of the fair were Catholics. And we went up there to talk to Bishop and whatever his system was there. I was standing there and talked to that wall. And, they just made up their mind that's what it's going to be. And I had called the priest off of the Delta Drive down there. And he was one of the leaders. And I had called him. And I had told him that he could come out to the big plant on the freeway. I would remove all supervision, all officers. The plant is his. He could come out there and go on that floor. And he said, no, you'll have somebody there. I will not have nobody there. The employees will be by themselves. And talk to them. You can come have lunch with us, check our facilities and everything. His answer was, I don't care if you have gold faucets out there, none of you. That's what we were fighting.
So it was all union.
Just, it didn't make any difference, because the president of the union, I think Ken Carr there, was our lawyer, and I mean the best, that man there. And Shinkman, the guy that's president of the union, in one of those articles he came out with, in fact I still have it, it's in one of the magazines there, didn't make any difference whether we got them or not, as long as, what if they go under or something, or they close? Doesn't make any difference. They got to have a union. And what his theory was, that if he got Farah, which was number one, in all clothing, quality, everything, if he got Farah, he could get the whole Southwest, get everybody. It didn't work out that way for him. I mean, they never could get election. We just had to finally go in with that. When we talk about the boycott, I mean, we losing counter space and everything. I think that first year we lost like, what, Bill, 30 million in sales or something? And it just got to the point where we just finally had to ask the people to put a sign. You had to have at least, what did it, Ken, 30% signs before you call for election? Yeah, and they never could get it. And so we finally got it at the election. And the most they got out of that many employees, the most they got paying dues, about 15%, 16%.
So it was never really unionized? It was or it wasn't? It was,
No,
yeah.
there was a representation arrangement, but the majority of the employees did.
The highest they ever got was 15, 16%. And then after that, after the first few months, I mean, those people stopped paying dues. They just, the people just didn't want it, that's all. Then they kept trying to force it in the church and everything.
I think that we have to credit the strike and boycott with this project and this whole history. Because when the Museum of History opened, the poster that's up on the second floor was the only artifact that the museum had for Farah. And Don Shapiro and Adair Margot and a number of other people said, this is not the history of Farah, this is part of the history of Farah. And that evolution became the Awakening Our Giants program. One of the things that I hope we explore in the seminar that's totally devoted to this subject is what was going on in the organization and in the market. What were the set of forces that put this in place, including the union's interest in trying to get a foothold in the Southwest, including what was going on with the market, including the conversation that Ken and I had a couple of years ago about the state of the organization, the span of control, the quality of supervision in the shipping room or the cutting room where the union was the most active, two of the most high pressure departments in the business, and as well as the very personal story of families being divided. Husbands and wives would disagree. The husband would go out, the wife wouldn't. One of the tragedies of the strike, for me, is that when the 2,500 people walked out, 2,500 sounds like a lot of people, it is, but there were 10,000 on the payroll, so 7,500 were still at work. But we were on short work weeks. We were in the process of doing layoffs, and a very small percentage of those people ever came back to work because of the change in the market, the change in the company. And so I think it's a huge subject, but it's a complicated one, because the labor dispute actually started before 1972. The organizing and the fight and the NLRB, National Labor Relations Board hearings, and the attempt to organize and the workers fighting back with what was called the Happies. Ken Carr joining the company. It was a 4 or 5 or 6 year chapter in the history that deserves its own discussion.
Well, the other thing was you had 2,500, whatever it was, that walked out. To show you how bad a place Farah was to work, it took us at least 4 to 5 weeks. We hired 500 people.
You could replace them.
Yes.
Yeah. But hear what Joe said in those numbers. 2,500 left, 500 positions were refilled, meaning the workforce really needed to be 2,000 lower than it was. So when I hear comments, which Michael remembers, from pro-union workers about job security and working conditions, there was an undercurrent of fear about people losing their jobs, because when you put a factory on a short work week, that's a signal that you're either in a short seasonal time frame or you really don't need all the workers, and that creates insecurity. I'm not suggesting that it was mismanaged. It was a set of circumstances that all converged at the same time. You were going to say something. I saw you pull the microphone.
No, I think you said the things that I was going to say.